see over the weekend, we do have Ernie Johnson. Because just like everybody else, Ernie Johnson, the host of the NBA on TNT, the finest pre-halftime and post-game show maybe in the history of television, is in hiatus as well. But Ernie Johnson joins us right now. Ernie, it's so great to talk to you again, my friend. And it's I say it to you all the time, and I mean it, man. That is absolutely the finest program on television today.
Tony, you're very kind to say that. But it's good to hear your voice again, man. It's good to talk to you. It's been a while, and I hope these days are going okay for you and your family and all the folks you love.
Well, thank you. And we know I've been in the basement long before everybody had to go into the basement, because I've been doing my podcast for a couple of years down here. I call it a wine cellar, though, because it sounds better than a basement. And we do have a lot of wine, so that's good. Sort of like when you guys, in the big studio down there at Turner Broadcasting, you've been away for that, since March 13th? When was the last show you guys did together? Was it March 13th? It was March
12th. Yeah, it was that Thursday night, the 12th, the night after the league had been suspended, and it was me and Shaq and Kenny, and Chuck wasn't there because he had been tested for coronavirus, so he was at his hotel awaiting the results. He had just been tested that day. He wouldn't know for another 10 days before it came back negative. So that was the last time we were on the same. The last time we were in Studio J, and March 12th.
Wow,
that's amazing.
That's a long time, and of course, everybody we talk to, Ernie, we look at the situation with Adam Silver says no decision yet. They're talking about there was a bubble concept, there wasn't a bubble concept, and now you got Mark Cuban saying he doesn't know if it's still safe, or he's worried about his players and sending them back to gyms to start working out. So there seems to be a lot of different pushing and pulling from different sides around the NBA on whether or not to get this thing going again. Do you feel that that's going to happen?
Well, I mean, if there's pushing and pulling in the NBA, it's just a reflection of the society that we're living in now, too, because you see states, some are opening things back up quicker than others are, and others are exercising more caution. And so I think it's the same way with the NBA. I mean, you could say that this city or this county or this municipality, says you can do this, but you can't do this. And so you're dealing with 30 NBA cities, and the rules aren't the same for everybody. So, no, I mean, it's like, it makes it impossible, Tony, to say, oh, yeah, well, it looks like things are right on track for us to start playing again on this date. It's impossible. And so I think you have to take into account the concerns that folks have, that players have, that if you, and I've said it since day one, I said if you're going to go back to work on this, if this season is going to resume, man, you better be pretty darn sure that this is safe, that this is going to be done, and you won't have to worry. And I don't know how you do. To me, you can't do that yet, certainly. And I don't know if we will see a resumption of the season. I just don't know that we'll see it.
Hey, Ernie, your colleague Shaquille O'Neal is recently on record as saying that he thinks they should just scrap the season. In fact, don't rush back and rush the playoffs, because any team that would have won would get an asterisk. What do you think about the asterisk comment?
No, I don't know about that. I can see where Shaq's coming from in terms of, hey, let's not rush back and maybe you don't play it out. But look, I'm not concerned about an asterisk.
I think we lost him.
Did we lose him right there?
Connection was a little spotty there.
Yeah, and then I heard that click,
anyway,
click.
So.
Was that the phone number that Jerry Stiller was trying to call in when he got the wrong woman on the line, the Esplanade number?
Possibly. Esplanade 7. Yeah, I think so.
I remember when phone just started out as like Poplar 50303, and it was PO, and then the number before they started having.
It was like only 4 numbers, right?
No, it was probably like Poplar 50303, so it was POP 0303. It was still 7 numbers. Mm-hmm. It wasn't shortened. Because instead of having 463 or 215 as the area code, but then the first 3 digits, used to be a number.
Okay.
PO5, so Poplar 5, then 0303. And then they went to all digits back in the day because they needed more numbers. It's like why they keep adding more area codes. Now that we've made you understand that, Ernie Johnson is back. I don't know what's going on. Are you in Atlanta, Ern?
Yes, I am in Brazelton, outside Atlanta. How much of that long-winded answer did you get about in response to Shaq?
We got most of it, and then you were when you were saying about, everybody's got a different opinion. Certainly, there are people who say let's play. Then Mark Cuban's like, and then there are people knocking Mark Cuban today because his Mavericks aren't going to go very far. So, and people are then saying, well, since his team really doesn't have a chance to win, I can see his reluctance to put his players out there and get them back on the floor while other teams are already working out in some states. So that's what I'm saying. It's I think of all the leagues, the NBA right now is up in the air because there's so many different opinions from really important people. I'm not talking about the fans or this guy here or this retired player there. I'm talking about the people in power.
Yeah, and I would say right now, and just to close out the comment on Shaq with the asterisk, is look, if they said right now everything is 100% perfectly safe, we can return to playing, I would say sure, let's do that. I wouldn't say, oh no, let's not because it's not going to be it's going to be a tainted championship with an asterisk. No, if they said right now let's play, let's do it, and then we'll figure out a way to make the playoffs work, and if it's streamlined in some way. So I would disagree with. The only way I would say, hey, scrap the season, is if there is still so much uncertainty on the safety of it that we can't continue. But in terms of what kind of a champion it is, that to me is not a reason to not play games.
Ernie Johnson, Tony Bruno, Harry Mason here, and of course, you've got the book, and you now have your journalism school that you've been doing online. Since this whole thing started, right?
Well, it had a 6-week run, Tony, and it was like I just started it out as saying, I'm just going to kind of open up a Twitter thing today and hopefully talk to journalism students who might have questions and maybe had their semester cut short. And then I just started reaching out to folks in the business, and before it was all over, we had had 35 people who are in media give an hour of their day to talk to students and answer their questions on a Twitter Live. So we did that for 6 weeks. It was a bunch of fun, and I've also transcribed them all, so there may be something more to it that, obviously it wasn't a sanctioned journalism school. It was just something that we called it. But my goal, I think, now is to take the best of those episodes and put them in print into some kind of a handbook that we can have for journalism students, just with all the different advice we heard from all these folks. So we'll see if I'm able to get that to happen. But it was so much fun while it lasted. That's for sure.
Hey, Ernie, of course, we've already missed a lot of things in sports, the NCAA tournament, the start of the baseball season, some big golf tournaments, the Kentucky Derby, et cetera, et cetera. What's the thing that you have missed the most since this whole thing happened?
Boy, that's, March Madness is one thing. I mean, and part of that is you do so much work, you so much research, and you're ramped up to where it's like, okay, I'm ready to go with this thing. I can't wait for the tournament to start. And then it's like, okay, it's not going to happen. But all of those things you mentioned, not being able to watch the Masters, not seeing Augusta with the,
the azaleas are blooming, yeah.
Yeah, the azaleas and the dogwoods. It's just like, and now we remember how we thought, guys, when the idea of games with no fans and televise those, and this was at the very start. It was like, oh, I don't know if that's going to work. You realize how much we would give anything to watch a game right now? I don't care if there's nobody in there. We just want to see live competition. We just want to, we're thirsting for that, and I think it's given us a realization that, man, we really do love that escape that it provides. That in the middle of real life, we get that couple hours where we can just sit and watch, not know who's going to win, and because I know there's a lot of programming out there of hey, the greatest this and the greatest that. But, man, you just want to watch something where you don't know the outcome before it starts.
Yet we've been watching something that we knew the outcome of for the last month or so on Sunday nights on ESPN, and now there are like days of the week spent breaking it down into 23 takeaways from last night's Last Dance episode. And we all know, we don't know all the inside stuff that we're seeing, obviously, but we certainly knew, and everybody's talking like, yeah, remember that shot? Remember Craig Elo? Remember this? Remember Gary Payton?
John Paxson.
I mean, it's all great stuff, man.
And then last night it was the LaBradford Smith chapter. Who saw that coming? But that was tremendous, and that's why they do such a great job with those. And I thought the way they played that out, like when David Aldridge said, "Has anybody brought up the LaBradford Smith situation?" And then we hear about this back-to-back between Washington and Chicago, and LaBradford Smith, the rookie, going for 37, and then Michael making up this story about him putting his arm around him and saying, "Nice game, Mike," which Jordan says later, "No, that never happened. I was just trying to get myself fired up." And that, to me, is one of the great parts about this, is that, you hear about, him trying to fire himself up and making up like an exchange like that. And it's kind of the same way. Remember, Shaq made up the thing about David Robinson not signing an autograph for him. For years, Shaq had this story about, I love playing against the Admiral because he disrespected me when I was a kid, asking him for an autograph, and he just blew me off. And then you ask David about it, and he says, "I don't know what he's talking about." And then Shaq eventually is like, "No, it never happened. I just kind of used that. I just used it as motivation." It's like it's just amazing to watch what goes on between the ears of these greats, and I think that's been the best thing about the Last Dance for me, is getting an idea of the depth of that competitiveness and that fire that drove Michael, even at the expense of the relationship he had with teammates. I mean, last night to hear all these guys say, "Oh no, he was a jerk and he was this and he was that," it's like, well, he's also the guy who improved your jewelry intake remarkably. So it's been really fun to watch.
Yeah, how about the George Karl thing last night? I never knew about that. Where he apparently shined him, walked right by him, didn't acknowledge MJ at a restaurant. That was amazing.
But the thing is, I was watching SVP last night, and they had George Karl on. And Scott did a great job, because the first thing out of his mouth was, "Okay, look, we're going to talk about that series you played with Chicago, but I got to ask you about this restaurant episode, and did it happen that way? Did you walk by his table?" And George Karl said, "Yes, I did. I walked by his table without acknowledging him." He says, because Brendan Malone, one of his assistant coaches, who was formerly with Detroit, had told George, once the series starts, don't give this guy anything to work with. Don't let him, you come over and put his arm around you. Don't let him do any. Just stay away from him, because he's going to use whatever that is to make the best player in the world even better. And Scott, to his credit, said, "Look, you were in a no-win situation." He said, "If you go up buddy-buddy with him, that's playing into his hands. And if you blow him off, he's going to use that too." There was nothing George Karl could do in that situation. If he had come up and was all glad-handing, that's one thing. And then if he ignored him, that was another thing. And so, again, it was just the things that Michael would use to fire himself up.
Well, there's no doubt Jordan has looked good in this thing, but it's interesting how people change. It's almost like watching a soap opera, because Scottie Pippen early looked like a poor victim. He got screwed over by the Bulls. Then he looked like a winner, and now he looked like a bad guy again last night, right?
No, that thing last night. I mean, when you have the whole description there, from Steve Kerr saying, he quit on us, and then you hear about Bill Cartwright with tears in his eyes saying, "You quit on us," and this is in the locker room of a team that just won that game on the Tony Kukoc shot. I mean, Kukoc delivered with the shot, but instead of this victorious locker room, you've got tears flowing in here as these guys are looking at Scottie Pippen and saying, "Man, you let us down." So when you watch this series, those are the things that you just kind of grab onto, not the fact that, yeah, I remember when they beat this team in 4 and this team in 6 and this team in 7. We know the outcome. But what you don't know are moments like that when, while you knew that it had happened and the 1.8 had happened, you didn't know that Bill Cartwright would have tears rolling down his cheeks when he's looking at Scottie Pippen and saying, "You quit on us." Man, that was powerful.
And EJ, how about the late great Craig Sager getting that question into Jerry Krause that prompted Krause to walk off the press conference?
Oh, yeah.
That was awesome.
What a way to start! What a way to start that segment. And yeah, and when I listened to it, I said, "Oh yeah, that's Craig." Craig's going to be with all the backstabbing and all this. Craig never pulled a punch on any of that stuff. He never really worried about how am I going to phrase this so that nobody takes any offense to it. It was just like, hey, Jerry Krause, how about all this backstabbing and all this stuff, and you guys are still here? And yes, and his answer, and then you hear that voice off camera saying, "That away, Craig," or "Nice going, Craig." and I just want to know the context of that. I want to know if that was somebody who was like disappointed because now we don't get to ask Jerry any more questions, or if somebody was like, "Thanks, nice going." You didn't know. And so sometimes you just like to know the context of why that was, of how that was said, if it was said in jest or if it was said like, okay, there goes Craig again, staring off the, ending a press conference because he asked the right question. So that was, that was an amazing moment.
And Tony Kukoc, of course, was the hero with the shot, a contested shot. He makes it. And then that's why people started hating on Scotty because he didn't want to play. But the other part is then Tony Kukoc got the contract from the 76ers and came here and pretty much didn't have to worry about anything or winning championships because they weren't that good.
But no, it's it was. I love all the give and take that you've seen in there. I love the cast of characters that was assembled, the B.J. Armstrongs and the Steve Kerrs and all of the detail that's told there with Steve, Michael saying Steve punched him in the chest, so he just hauled off and hit him in the eye. I mean, it is in a way a soap opera, but in a way it's just like this is a tale of a championship and how and the drive you have to have if you're ever going to put a string of titles together like that.
The great Ernie Johnson. And Ernie, the one thing that we're waiting for basketball. It looks like baseball. The owners made an agreement today, and the players are going to vote on it about perhaps resuming. Because I know you're a big baseball guy too. You're the NBA guy, but baseball is important to you, especially down there in Atlanta. Do you have because we don't know what's going on with any of these sports, but it looks like baseball at least has some sort of a July plan to have some games.
80 games.
80 games, and they're going to have no DA or DHs for everybody. The umpires are going to be on the field, but there'll be no replay. The broadcasters won't even be able to be at the park to do the games in some of these proposals that I've seen. No mound visits, no first and third base coaches. Everything's done, and no replay. It's all going to be done from the dugout, and there's not going to be replay at all no matter where you are. So you think people will accept that if that is the plan? We'll just take whatever we can get, or do you think people will not watch this and say, what is this all about? This isn't really what I want.
No, I'll be interested to see how the players respond to that, and if that's, if they do draw a line and say, yeah, we do want to play, but hey, let's take another look at some of these rules. And I'll have to plead ignorance on this too because I haven't seen all the things that you've pointed out right now about first and third base coaches or mound visits or a replay or any of that thing. Sure, you're going to make the game go by quicker. That's
yes.
for sure. And so from that token, that might really work. But it's going to be very strange if we got to call games and not be at the ballpark because so many times you see things that aren't seen on the screen when you're calling a game. It's just noticing things in the ballpark or noticing things on the top step of a dugout while you're calling the game. So now you're going to be limited just to what's on the screen, and so that does makes it a little bit different. And then, of course, if you've got nobody cheering, then it's really strange because that to me is one of the great parts about especially doing playoff baseball, is that less is always more, in my opinion, when I'm calling a playoff baseball, because the fans are so into it. The sound is so crisp, and you can, that's like another analyst. You have, like I'll have Jeff Francoeur or Ron Darling next to me, but the fans and that atmosphere, that's the other part. So, yeah, you get something from Ron, you get a little bit from me, but you get so much from looking at the fans and hearing the fans and the roar of the crowd when the ball is hit. And now that's going to be very strange to call a game with none of that that ambient sound. So we'll see how that plays out. But I do want to see how the players take to this kind of an idea.
Yeah, they don't want to do the shelter in place in Arizona plan because the families simply are not going to be able to sit around the players and the families for an extended period of time in a safe position because they have to go out, and that's what they're worried. So that plan seems to be out the window. No bubble baseball and no neutral sites in Arizona, Florida, and Texas are not viable. So we'll find out what they're going to come up with. But I don't get that. I'm with you as far as the broadcasters. They're up in the booth. They don't have to go into the dugout. They don't have to go into the clubhouses because the media won't be able to. I just don't get why the broadcasters can't be on site where at least they can provide some of the things that, you're not going to get because there's no people there.
Yeah, well, I don't know. Again, I need to see the proposal to comment on that, and obviously they would have their reasons for doing that. But part of it, I think, is just the bare bones, probably the bare bones concept of, look, we're going to do this with as few moving pieces as we can, and putting as few people into that mix as we can. And they've seen already. They said, look, Zoom has been the way everybody's operated now. You've had people that you see on TV doing their job from their living room. So maybe that'll work this way too. It's just going to be kind of a strange thing to watch.
Yeah, the owners have approved their plan today, which was some of the things that I ran down. So now the Players Association will vote tomorrow, and then we'll have a better idea on what the next step is. So right now it seems like baseball is the closest, unless the players reject it entirely, which I can't imagine them doing. I mean, they want to play too. They'll get paid, but not all of their salaries if there's no season. And I don't know what part of the equation that's important to. But to get, because the people who work in stadiums aren't going to benefit from this, obviously, right? The concession stands and anything else. So there's going to be a lot of people who still won't work. But the baseball television revenue, I guess, is good enough that they would put this back on and find a way to make enough money and get the advertising rates up because everybody would be sitting at home watching instead now.
I just think, I mean, it's going to me, you have to walk before you run on this thing. And if you can think of a way that gets players back on the field in competition, that's done safely, then that's a start. Still, the other questions remain. What if somebody gets sick? Then what does that mean for that team? What does that mean for, in terms of quarantining? How much of this is dependent on having enough testing and that kind of thing? I just think there are so many variables that it's hard just to say, okay, we've all said it's going to work, let's do it, and then you have to answer the question of, okay, now what if? And if you don't have that answer, if you don't have those answers as you go into something like this, then you can't start.
Last golf question for Harry, because Harry's a golf guy, and I know you are too, EJ.
Well, he's got this big match coming up with Tiger Woods and Peyton Manning against Phil Mickelson and Tom Brady. Are you buying how bad Tom Brady's game is?
No, I would never buy anything about Tom is bad. But I think that's going to be, again, one of those things where we want so badly to watch sports. And I think, when you got guys like, and I did it the first time. I did the Tiger Phil thing the first time around, and it was fun to watch those two. But I think adding, certainly Peyton stole the show in the as we announced the event a week ago. I mean, his A game was right there, talking about Brady's B&E and all that stuff, and and playing with an ankle bracelet, and and so I think that having those other two will increase some of the talk out there, and I just think Peyton is so naturally funny that he will this thing enjoyable to watch too, and more, probably more lighthearted than the first one was. So, yeah, let's, I think they're both supposed to be like 8 handicappers. So, there's, as I saw somebody write, so there's the possibility if these guys are both 8s that there will be, a few cringeworthy shots hit, so that, it'll make the guy at home feel better when he sees somebody hit a grounder. But it should be some fun, and I think the format of it, playing best ball on the front and playing alternate shot on the back, will make it fun. And those guys, they realize that they're on. Look, these guys are on center stage for this thing. It's not gonna benefit anybody if they all clam up. They're all going to be wearing mics. They all have to try to make it happen and make it worth the while for the viewing public who wants to watch these guys play.
Ernie, we really, really, really appreciate your time. And unfortunately, we don't have time for the Nito stat of the night for old time's sake.
I don't have one anyway.
Well, Ernie, it was good to track you down, man, because I follow you on Twitter, and I was like, how am I going to get a hold of Ernie Johnson? But we finally got a hold of you, man, and I really, really appreciate you coming on. It's so great to talk to you again. Thank you so much.
No, you got my number. I'll talk to you soon. Thanks, guys.
All right, there he is, the great Ernie Johnson from TNT.
Yeah, and he's got the book Unscripted, and his Twitter follow is @TurnerSportsEJ.
Exactly right.
He's great.